Hey guys, welcome to another amazing episode of Kev Ja. Today is Monday. Usually Monday, we like to call it Nerdy Mondays, where we talk about nerdy stuff. So if you recall, Ja had some questions regarding SharePoint, and we started off on just kind of going through the basics of SharePoint. And we thought we'd just kind of continue on this in case someone's following this line of training or videos or podcasts that we're doing relating to training. So we just thought we'd just continue with that. So Jai, again,
Yes,
great
sir.
questions that you had last time. Amazing. Had me thinking too. And so just thought if you had some more ideas or thoughts regarding SharePoint or you want to learn some more, what's up?
Yeah. Yeah. No, I think for me, I want to know more about things like the lists, the libraries, permissions. Last time we spoke, you launched SharePoint. So now I think it's just getting to the details about how to create a SharePoint site, what the lists are, what libraries are. But you get into the point where you start talking about permissions, and maybe that's moving too far. But I think those are the main things you hear about when people talk about SharePoint.
Yeah. And just to clear, we didn't really create a SharePoint site. We kind of just showed how to
Yes.
access SharePoint. Totally get what you're saying. But that's a lot. So is there anywhere you kind of want to start? Like maybe just
Yeah.
creating the site, or
Let's
did you want to
start.
dive into a site or what?
No, I think it'll be easier the step by step because I believe, based on my understanding, you need to create a site first. I think that's a starting point. I could be wrong, but being a novice here. And then once you create the site, there's other pieces that you could start doing, like I talked about lists and libraries, maybe just to show where those items are or how they're accessed once the site is created, or if there's something you have to do before even get into the lists and libraries.
Okay, perfect. And did you want to still stick with your fictitious barn
The
analogy,
barn
or
and
did you want to upgrade that to something a
I
little
think I
bit
think I
more
think I think
current
I'll
and trending?
maybe I'll start with a chicken coop or something.
Chicken
The
coop.
chickens.
Okay, so
I'm just
chicken
kidding.
coop, you want to inventory all the poops and the egg
And
to
the eggs and
babies
and the
and get
chicks.
some metrics
Yeah.
as to how many chickens are dying per day because of poor ventilation. Like what?
I think how many are living because of good ventilation.
Okay, right back. Okay, so I'll just start sharing my screen here, and you just let me know if you can see my screen.
Yeah, I can see it.
Okay, perfect. Yeah, so this is basically SharePoint. Sorry, it's not SharePoint. This is actually the admin center. And to get to SharePoint, if you recall from our previous video, you just simply click on the waffle icon, and then it'll take you to SharePoint, or you can go through apps or a number of different ways to get to SharePoint. So to get to SharePoint, just click on the app, and then what that will do is it will bring up another screen and just confirming that you can see my other screen that says SharePoint, right, Jai?
Yes, I can see it.
Okay, perfect. So this is basically, think of this as your dashboard. This isn't really SharePoint just yet. It's more the M365 dashboard into SharePoint. Okay, so I guess when you provision a new environment in M365 or you create a new subscription, looks like Microsoft creates a default communication site for you to use because I did not create this. And so if you click on it real quickly, you can immediately just get into SharePoint. This is it. This is basically SharePoint, at least from a communication site perspective. However, like you said, we're going to start slow. We're going to start from the beginning. So real quickly, I'll go over the anatomy of the dashboard. So the M365 dashboard into SharePoint, and then we'll actually just create our first site. So you have your following. So basically this is just like any other social media thing. You can follow different sites, and when you do follow, they'll show up here. Any recent activity or any recent sites you visited, they'll show up here. And then you could have some featured links, such as administrative links and things like that. Here, you can edit this and have some administrative links that you may need or you want other people to access when they're on this dashboard.
Just a quick question. So as a user, say I subscribe to Microsoft Office Suite and then I launch SharePoint and it brings me to this. Do I have to have special privileges to get to this point, or I could just be any user on the internet?
Yeah, that's a good question. Pretty sure as long as you're a user on the environment, you can access that dashboard.
Okay.
Because think of it, it's just like any other page or dashboard within M365. It doesn't act any different. However, if there is a site that is a private site and you have not been granted access to that private site, you may not see that site on your dashboard because you don't have access to it. Or possibly you do see it, and then when you click on it, you'll get access denied. So the dashboard isn't really a site in itself. It's just a dashboard, just kind of a page that just shows you all the sites you have access to. Hopefully that answers your question.
Yes, it does. Thank you.
So basically, this is the navigation of the dashboard, and the two main kind of inputs or options you have are on the top here, top left, and you have create new post and then create a page. And basically create a post is just like what it is. You can create news articles, posts, messages, things like that, or you can create a site. And in this case, we're going to focus on creating a site. So to do that, we just click on create site. And then what that does is it will bring you to a dialog box where you have to select your type of site. And again, Jai, just confirm you can see the dialog box.
Yes, I could see that there's a team site and then there's a communication site. So you mentioned that the communication site is like the default,
That's right.
correct?
That's
Okay.
right. Well, almost. So it's a default site that gets created. But in terms of like what is the standard team, like standard site, it's the team site. And what a team site is, or real quickly, I'll go back. What's the difference between a team site and a communication site? Well, basically, communication site is just mainly for communication and disseminating information. And then team sites are mainly focused on collaboration. So on a team site, if you're working on a document and you want to collaborate with others and, go through approval processes with that document to make sure it's viewed and finalized, that you would use a team site for. Now, when that document, let's call it a policy or something that's been completed, you would then want the masses or the organization to have access and to view that policy document, the same document that you've been working on and collaborating on and developing and completing on your team site. So where would you store that final document? In a communication site, which is basically a watered down version of a team site, but it's more geared towards disseminating information and viewing documents or viewing final documents or, schedules, reports, and in this case, policies and things that have been finalized and ratified in the organization. So that's the biggest difference between a communication site and a team site. Does it make sense, Jai, or do you have any
Yeah,
thoughts or
no,
questions?
the only thing I was thinking about was when you mentioned team site and it's for collaboration. Does that relate to the actual Microsoft Teams collaboration tool itself, the Teams chat? Like, is there any correlation between a team site and Microsoft Teams itself?
That's a great question. And short answer is no and yes. Reason being, I know Microsoft is terrible at branding. So what Microsoft Teams is, or MS Teams, that is basically the communications component of M365. So remember something called
Yes.
So Teams replaced Skype, and SharePoint is Microsoft's
Version.
enterprise content
Enterprise.
management
Oh,
system,
content management
or
system. Okay.
their content management system. So MS Teams is the communication part or the system, and then SharePoint is the document management system. So when you do access Teams, if you're familiar with Teams, you're actually just accessing a newer version of Skype. Now, within MS Teams, there's something called File tab, that file tab, any single time you create a new channel in MS Teams, a file tab is created. That file tab basically creates a SharePoint site in the background. So that's where
Interesting.
you probably get confused, because when you go to Teams or MS Teams, you're basically communicating with others. You have the chat, but then anytime you go to the file tab, that is literally SharePoint. So Microsoft or Teams will spawn or create a unique type of Teams site in the background to support the documents that you would add to MS Teams.
Okay. I
I
can see
know,
why you
it's
said
really
yes and
annoying.
no. Yeah, I can see why you said
Exactly.
yes and no. Yeah, because technically you are creating a SharePoint site, but it's through Teams communication
That's
of a
exactly right.
portion of MS Teams. Okay.
Exactly. So not to be confused with, now we're going to create a
Teams
team
site.
site, which is
Yes.
not MS Teams. Blame Microsoft. It is ridiculous. Okay. So last time, so this again, collaboration, communication, collaboration, communication. Since we already have a communication site, we're just going to create a team site. So let's click on that. And then once we click on that, we're going to be presented with several different types of templates. And this is pretty cool, because now, instead of just having a generic site that gets created for you, and instead of having like a blank canvas, you could actually go through some of these and kind of see if maybe what you're trying to create is already kind of built in a kind of template. So for example, if I'm trying to create a training course, instead of me using the standard team site template, which is this, and having a blank canvas in a sense, I can then just click on this, and it may have some particular metadata. If you remember metadata, columns, certain web parts already set up for me that are well known to be used in training courses. So it's a really great way to kind of kickstart, get your, what do they call, your juices, your creative juices going,
Oh,
because now you're not just looking at a blank canvas. So I really like the fact that Microsoft does this. Many years ago, it's never like this. It was all just blank canvas. You have to build it on your own. And if we go back, we can click on this real quickly, and you can see once again, for communications, they have some
they
standard
have the
stuff that's
templates as
more,
well. Mhm.
that's right, particular for communication. So standard communication, brands, crisis management, et cetera, et cetera. So it's
I
really,
also
really cool. So
noticed, sorry, I also
yeah, no,
noticed
go
that
on.
there's from Microsoft, which is the standard templates that they offer you, but it says they're from your organization. So that means that you can also embed your organization's templates if you have one.
Yep, that's right. That's right. Microsoft has this engine called lookbooks. So you can actually look for it, or Google it yourself, SharePoint lookbooks. And basically, you can kind of create your own template in a sense. You could also use one of these as your standard template and develop a unique custom template for your organization. And why would people do that, or why would organizations do it? Sometimes organizations have pretty strict policies, no internet connectivity, things like that. And so they want to control what gets created in terms of internet connectivity, metadata. Sometimes, organizations are very strict with respect to their content types that get created. And again, feel free to ask me what a content type is, Jai.
Waiting for
And
you to land because go ahead.
yeah, and so that's one of the reasons why there's the for your organization in a nutshell.
Okay.
Okay,
So
so
no,
yeah,
go ahead.
yeah, go on.
No, I was gonna say with the content type that you're referring to, are those a part of the metadata within the SharePoint site, or it's a different piece?
Yes, yeah. It's a unique type. It's a unique type of metadata. Reason reason being is that metadata basically defines what type of information you're putting into SharePoint. So for example, a document content type basically tells SharePoint that you're uploading the document. So a Word document is classified as a document content type. Excel document is classified as a document content type, et cetera, et cetera. Now, that is your generic. And so that content type may have some default metadata or columns attached to it. So because it's so generic, because the Excel could be a content type, Word could be a content type, PDF documents could be a content type. The metadata associated with a a document content type is very simple. So I think the default metadata is just title and name, for example, something like that. Now, if you wanted to, what you could do is you can instantiate other content types or create your own content types from the document content type. So, for example, you can instantiate a new copy of the document content type. And then if you wanted to create a content type for just reports, now you would create a new content type from the document content type called reports. And then when you upload a document that is a report, you could then now label that document or classify that document as a report content type. And then, of course, because you have that unique content type, you can now associate certain metadata that would only relate to reporting. And so now you have a content type for reports with report metadata, and then you have a content type for generic documents with generic metadata. Make sense?
Yep. Gotcha.
Okay, perfect. So, Jai, which template do you want to use? Pick
Let's
a
use the
flavor,
blue.
any flavor.
Is the blue
You
one.
like blue?
I
You
like
like blue,
blue.
little boy? Yes, you like blue?
Baby blue.
Okay, there you go. Okay. All right. So now what we're seeing is just kind of telling us what things are going to be built within this template. So basically it's giving you a bit of highlight news, promote upcoming events, et cetera, and what's included, just one home page pretty much. And then of course you can preview it if you like. So this is basically what it's going to look like when we create it. And then of course you can, if you like it, just click on use template. And then first things first, you got to give your site a name. So we'll call it KevJai per site. And what it's doing is it's just basically testing, checking to make sure that that URL can in fact be used. And then you can put a site description. What it also will do is it will create an email address. So basically it's just going to use our site name as
My
the
name.
email address. Yeah. And then now this is going to be our site URL. So it kind of gives you a bunch of stuff here, just things to take note of. If you don't like it, you could always change it, et cetera, et cetera. And then you can always change your template if you like. And then once you're good, you click next. And then if you remember, I was saying there's private sites. So this is where you would decide whether your site is private or not. So if it's private, this means that only members, only people that you invite to the site will have access to it. Versus if you do public, this means everybody in the organization. So I want to make it clear this is only organization wide, public and private. Doesn't mean like people in just the greater world will be able to access your documents. There is a way to do that, but by default, this is just relating to within the organization. So public means everyone in the organization, and then private would mean that only people that you invite would have access and see this site. So
So
for
quick question,
simplicity, we'll
Kevin.
just, yeah.
Sorry. So when you said public and private is basically for members within the organization, now that we are creating one, which organization does this tie into? Like, did you create an organization prior to creating this site? How would this tie to the organization where only you and I can access it?
So that's a good question. So anytime you sign up for M365, you are automatically creating an environment, and that environment is an organization because M365 is composed of Microsoft productivity tools as well as Microsoft Active Directory. And so what Active Directory is basically Microsoft's AD or Active Directory. I don't know how else to explain it.
So it's kind of like, is it
But
storing? information about users. Is that what Active Directory is,
That's
essentially?
right. That's right. That's right. What I'll do is I'm going to create this site and then I can quickly jump into Admin Center to give you a better understanding of Active Directory. Okay. But
Sounds good. Thank
basically,
you.
no problem. That's what this is saying. So when it says organization, think of Active Directory. So everyone within the Microsoft 365 Active Directory that you're currently logged in with. So we're in M365. That's the Active Directory environment that we're in. Okay. So I'll just create this. And once we click on public, so I'll just, for simplicity, I'll do public. So this means everyone in the organization can access it. And then we'll click on create. Click on create. Real quickly, you can choose a different language if you like, of course, but we'll choose English. And then this is where you would start adding members. So within our Active Directory, Jai, this is our in M365, we should really only have one name. And it's me, basically. I'm the only real person that is in this organization. But if you had multiple people in this organization, you can start adding all those people. As you type, it would find them in Active Directory. It would do a search as you're typing, and it would find those users. So you could add them here. This is optional. You don't have to do that. You could always do this later. And then once you're done, you click finish.
So I guess just another question. Sorry to stop you there for a bit.
Yeah.
If you have like 1,000 within your organization and they're sectioned off based on their roles within Active Directory, that would appear as a drop down when you try to create the sites, and then you can pick and choose which of the lists or which of the members you want to add as individuals that can view this particular site. Is that how it works? It's not like you have to go through each person within the organization because that would take time. It's basically, does it tie with Active Directory in such a way that you could select from a group of people as opposed to selecting individuals? I guess that's my question.
Yes and no. So how Active Directory works is, think of it like just a database of users. And then in that database, there's other unique types of things. So you can create security groups. You can create distribution groups. You can create, so if you created, say, a distribution group or a security group, and then within that security group, you had a certain number of people, that security group would be findable on that search. And then you can find that security group or that Active Directory group, and then you could add them as that group. And then thus all those people, if there's 10 people in that group, those 10 people would be added to this SharePoint site or any SharePoint site in one go. But if you do not do that, then you would have to manually add each person.
The fact, gotcha.
So what public does, so if remember, I chose public permissions as opposed to private site or public site. What public does in Active Directory, there's always a standard everyone type of group. So anyone in Active Directory, they're always added to this everyone group. So when you do public, that group is added to this SharePoint site. So everyone in the organization now has access to the site because I made it public. Versus if I did private, then that group would not be added. And then you would have to add every individual person manually or add them to a group in Active Directory and then just add that Active Directory group from that search box. Does that make sense?
Yes, it does. Makes sense.
Okay.
Thank you.
So real quickly, I'll just jump to Admin Center and show you Active Directory. So SharePoint does not have its own permission structure. It literally relies 100% on Active Directory. Okay, Active Directory is basically here. This is Admin Center. So when you're in M365 and you subscribe to a business subscription, you're going to have all of these options, and then you're going to always have an option called admin. And this is where you basically administer and manage your whole entire M365 environment. So much so, even if I click on show more or show all, you scroll down a bit, you're going to see SharePoint. And this is basically the admin center for SharePoint. So you see how here This is the front. This is what the end users see.
Mhm.
And then if you recall, we created a site from the dashboard. Well, this is the actual real dashboard. This is the,
That's the
yes,
admin dashboard.
this is, I was getting confused. Yeah, so this is the admin, as you rightly said, dashboard. Now, average person, regular users are not going to see this. This is for advanced. Obviously, if you have a SharePoint administrator, he would use this only. You would power users, regular end users. Those people would not, in your organization, would not have access to this. You should only have your administrators have access to it. But real quickly, here it'll show you my active sites. So as you can see, here is the site that we just created. And then here is the this is the communication site that got created by default.
Default.
And then I guess this is some other type of site that gets created. I guess it's for Teams. So remember I said, when you have MS Teams, it creates a SharePoint site in the background for
Right.
the files that you upload to MS Teams. So that's probably this. And then as you can see, it even says Teams site.
Team site.
Yeah, MS Teams. I know, it's really annoying. So yeah, and then of course, if I wanted to, I could even create a site from here as well. And again, Teams, communications.
Will this be another site or the same site?
It would be a brand new site that would be created from
Oh,
here.
okay.
Yeah,
Okay,
I'm
there
just
you go.
showing you.
Yeah. Where
Yeah,
you
I'm just
that
showing
there's
you.
many areas that you could create a site from. Okay.
Thank you. Exactly. Again, this is really only for administrators. Okay. But because this is beyond the scope of what we're currently trying to show, I'm just going to kind of digress from this. Again, we'll have more in-depth courses and things that dive deep into all these things. Should somebody or any one of you want to become a SharePoint administrator. But right now, the scope is really for SharePoint end users, such as Jai. Okay, so so if I can go back to the main admin center, so this is SharePoint admin center, I'll just click on admin again. And then what I want to show you is basically this is Active Directory. So all Active Directory is just users. And so in every organization, anytime you work for any company, assuming they're using Microsoft, there is an Active Directory that controls how you log on to all your workstations. So when you log in to your PC and it says, what's your password and login? That is basically going to Active Directory validating you. And then it creates a token, a session token that allows you to log in. And then that session token stays alive. So when you access different systems while you're logged in, it's seamless. You don't have to keep trying to re-log in and re-authenticate. And that's basically the power of Active Directory. So in this case, here is my AD account, my username, my display name, all my licenses that I have access to, and that's it. So when I typed in my name, it automatically came up with all the stuff. So if I deleted this record from Active Directory, I would cease to have access to SharePoint any
No
longer.
access. Yeah.
Yeah. And then if I
Fair
remember,
enough.
I said we can allow for guest users. So this is where you can add guest users if you like. This will show deleted users, etc., etc. Okay, make sense?
Yes, that's thank you.
Okay. All right. So back to the regularly scheduled program. So basically, this is our first site. So Jai, congrats! You just created your first site. How does it feel?
I feel awesome.
Great, great. Okay, so a couple of things here. This is a lot of information, but I'm going to try to break it down as quickly as and simple as possible. So think of an anatomy, like your arms, your body, you have your legs, torso. So in SharePoint, you have your left navigation. So this is your left navigation.
Your left
You
leg.
have your, exactly. You have your top header, which is usually, your site, things like that, your search. And then you usually have top contextual navigation. It's a lot, but it's called top contextual navigation. The reason why it's called top contextual is because this navigation usually changes based off of what type of page you're on in SharePoint. So right now we're on a home page, so it's showing us home page options. If we go into a document library, the top contextual navigation changes to now document library based navigation items. But you also notice that the left navigation stays the same. Okay. So to go back to the home, just click on the home up here, or you can click on the icon KF here if you like, but that's how to get back to home. So that's the main type of navigation sections. And then this section is a little bit unique. It's mainly for M365 stuff, but this is a bit of navigation too. So if you want to go back to the home start page or the dashboard where we created this site from, you can go there from here. If you have any sites, personal sites, you can access them from here. And then news. Remember it said you can create news or
Brand
posts.
news.
They may go here. And then here, this will populate with files, recent files that you've used. Lastly, this is your site, your My List. So remember, the whole reason why we got here is because you wanted to see the difference between a list and a library.
Yeah.
This is an example. This will show you your files from libraries. This will show you your list. And then, of course, you can add any new items here. But I want to make it clear, this is not really SharePoint. This is just a tab into M365, okay?
All these pieces are, we haven't really done anything. We just created a site. What's the first step you'd like? Typically, if I just wanted to learn about SharePoint, which we are doing right now, and I came to SharePoint and I created my site, what's typically the first thing you have to do other than understanding navigation, the contextual navigation and other pieces? Like, is there something that must be done first after you create your site? Or is it based on the requirements of what the site is meant to do when you create the site?
It's not, it's kind of subjective. So again, we created it, we use a template. So had we used a blank team site, the tasks and the things that we want to start with might differ. But because we're using a template, you can see a lot of things are kind of already here
It's already
for
been
us.
created.
So
Yes.
yeah, so that might be subjective as to what is the first thing to do, quote unquote, because we're using a template. I think just in my experience, I like to, when I come into a house, I just like to see where all the rooms are. I like to see where all the doors are, where the washroom is. So I like to acclimate. So that's just me. I like to acclimate to understand, get an idea, get a feel for everything. So if I could just quickly continue with the overall anatomy, we did the left nav, we did the contextual navigation, we did the top header where you can search and find things. So this search is contextual as well. So if you notice, it'll say search this site when you're on the home page. But if we jump back into the document library again, it now says search this library. So the search is contextual as well. So navigation is contextual and search is contextual. So we'll go back home. And then other areas are the top right. This is basically your administrative stuff. So the main thing would be your gear icon or your settings. You left click on that. And then now you'll be submitted or you'll be presented with a kind of flyout window or menu. And then here you can, go to site content, information, look at permissions, and you can even change the look of how the site looks. You can change branding, etc., etc. And then if you could always go back to M365. And then the last in the major area is the content area. So all these things are static. So left nav is static. Obviously, you can add lists or add new items, but pretty much it's static. And then you have the contextual navigation that's changing and dynamic in the search. And then of course, here's your admin stuff. But all this stuff, everything within this area is called the content area. This is the area that pretty much changes the most. This is the area where you can add web parts, things like that. Again, we're going to get into web parts a little bit later, but suffice it to say, think of this area as your canvas. This is where you're going to design. This is where you're going to have people access the most things interface. So for example, here we have a little widget for the document library. Then we have some links, quick links and navigation. We have a big, huge image here where we can click on get to other areas of the site. That's the content area. And then real quickly, you could also add teams to any site. So remember what I said? Anytime you use Teams, there's a SharePoint site that's created in the background.
On the
Well,
file,
vice
yes.
versa. That's right, vice versa. So since we now have a team site, Microsoft Teams SharePoint site, we can now create a Microsoft Teams that now connects and uses this as its files tab. So that's an option. And to add to what you were saying earlier in terms of where to start, if you really want to get some instructions, we could always click on here. This is kind of like an announcements. And then here it'll basically answer your question, next steps. So customize. So this is what Microsoft recommends or suggests. Customize your site, invite members, post some news, and add any chat or communication, which is MS Teams, to your site if you like. And then of course change the look and feel if you like. So yeah, that's basically it in a nutshell with respect to the anatomy. Any questions, or did you want me to get right into documents and lists?
Yeah, I think this is a whole lot of information. Definitely more knowledgeable than 40 minutes ago when we started. So this is extremely helpful. So in terms of next steps, you mentioned the web pages, the list, and the libraries. But I'm seeing that based on the fact that we selected a template as a default, I see some libraries, or should I call them documents folders already created, where it says new. There's a general, there's a project team one already created. If we wanted to,
Project team, where's that?
right under where the document sample content,
Oh,
all those
okay.
folders there.
Yeah,
And I think that's part of the default of selecting this training template. If we
that's right.
wanted to, if if we wanted to recreate that or create something different, maybe those are things I would be interested in learning as well.
Okay, so you're saying you want to maybe create a site that's from the basic, like from the
No,
just
not
no
necessarily
template?
basic. Not necessarily basic. I guess where it says new, there's option. I believe there's an option to create a new folder, or you can rename any of those folders based on a business need, because this is
Yeah.
just a default, and you
Mhm.
can rename it and change it as the business sees fit, correct?
That's correct. So basically, it's just showing you a sample document library, which was created. And then because we use the template, it just kind of provisioned these folder in anticipation that you might find them useful. But you did make a good point, Jai. We are 40 minutes deep. We did cover a lot. I think it was great. I think it was very fruitful. I was hoping to get to documents and lists today, but we got a little bit closer. We created the site. And so I think at this point, we should maybe stop here and then we will convene in the next session. We'll dig deeper into documents and lists because it is quite a lot just to go through them. That's the pretty much the bread and butter of SharePoint lists and libraries. So I'd
Oh
rather us get
man,
some.
the
Yeah.
document list was the part I was getting excited for, because it seems like
Yeah.
that's the part that is the juicy part of learning about SharePoint. But I understand it was a lot, but like I said earlier, I gained a lot in terms of what you shared today. So thank you. I appreciate that. And I think I'm no longer a novice when it comes to SharePoint.
Perfect. Perfect. Okay. So we'll stop it here and we will continue next time and we'll focus a little bit more and we'll basically dive more deeper into the world of SharePoint. All right. Everyone that's listening, hopefully you found it fruitful. Please let us know if you have any questions, concerns, if an area that I went over too fast or wasn't clear, please let us know. Jai is supposed to be like you guys, but sometimes it is what it is.
Okay.
All right, guys. So once again, it's been an absolute pleasure. And this is Kev Ja. Guess call it Nerdy Mondays, where we just talk about nerd stuff. I think for this particular series, we're going to just focus on SharePoint, but nonetheless, Nerdy Mondays, where we just talk about nerdy technical things. All right. So once again, it's been a pleasure. And keep giving us comments, ideas, suggestions, like, subscribe. And yeah, we have training courses. If you want to access our broader training, you can go to our training website. The link should be below. And yeah, you can get some more information there. And also, you can request the type of training. Again, we love this stuff. If you have a certain type of training you want us to do, you can sign up for our requests or our waiting lists, and then we can also accommodate those as well. All right. Once again, it's been a pleasure and take care. God bless.
Thanks, guys. Bye.